Hello there, Eliza here, and Marvel has made a lot of movies, in a lot of genres. However, there are some Marvel properties or ideas that will likely never see the silver screen. As a fan of comics over the decades, there are several Marvel comics or ideas I would love to see as movies, but Marvel will likely never ever make them. I'm sure you all have your Marvel properties you would love to see movies of, but these are mine. The order tries to balance out how much I want to see them versus how much it is likely for Marvel to make them. Basically, number 10 is the one I like, but also the most likely to be made into a movie, while number 1 is the one I love the most, but will never happen. With that stated, let's get started. Number 10. Terror of the Brood. The Brood are long-running enemies of the Marvel Universe, primarily of space-based heroes and the X-Men, who were the first to face them. For those who don't know, the Brood look like this. Yes, they do look a bit like xenomorphs and also kind of have the same trick. They lay their eggs inside of other beings. However, I would say the Brood are even more terrifying as the xenomorphs burst out of your body after incubating, while the Brood turn you into them. And as there are a few people who have been cured of being turned into Brood, the horrifying part is you remember what they do while they are controlling your body. You are conscious inside of them. While I would personally like to see the X-Men face them, if Marvel chose several of their lower tier cosmic characters and had them be the ones to face off against the Brood, they could make a truly terrifying horror movie set in the MCU. It would be a visual treat too, because the Brood don't use normal spaceships. They use Akanti, and Akanti look like this. They are space whales. Think of a large group of cosmic characters, where not all of them will make it out alive, facing off against the Brood while some of them are turned into the Brood while fighting off against them inside of a space whale. If Marvel wanted a horror movie, this would be a good one. Number 9. Brotherhood of the Shield. Wait, haven't they already made movies and shows about S.H.I.E.L.D., you might be asking? And you'd be right. However, in the comics, S.H.I.E.L.D. is a lot stranger. Because I'm not talking about the S.H.I.E.L.D. organization that we've seen already. I'm talking about the earlier incarnations of S.H.I.E.L.D. In the past 15 years or so, the mythology behind S.H.I.E.L.D. has been expanded going back as far as ancient Egypt. Now what I'm suggesting is a S.H.I.E.L.D. movie set in the 1950s containing a greatest hits of the ancient S.H.I.E.L.D. founders and members. There are so many characters they could utilize for such a film, but here are some of the characters of the Brotherhood of S.H.I.E.L.D. which would be pretty good for a film. Leonardo da Vinci. Yes, that Leonardo da Vinci. He has a time machine. The Forever Man, also known as Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni. I think I said that right. Yes, him. He is immortal because the comic being Infinity touched him, making him exist at all points of time simultaneously. Archimedes and the Colossus of Rhodes. Yes, Archimedes was a member of the Brotherhood of the Shield at one point, building the Colossus of Rhodes to help stop a Kree invasion. Sir Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, was also the Grand Master of the Brotherhood of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Sorcerer Supreme for a while, who used magic to give himself immortality, and could be set up as the villain of this film if you read the comic. Oh boy, is Newton villainous. Ben Franklin, who managed to continue on his work as a ghost after being a member of the Brotherhood. Nostradamus, forcefully given immortality by Newton and tortured to keep informing him about the future. Howard Stark, the father of Tony Stark. Nathaniel Richards, the father of Reed Richards. Night Machine, a cyborg Nikolai Tesla. And lastly, Apocalypse, the long-running Marvel character who has been both enemy and ally to the X-Men over the decades. Think about what you could do with these kinds of characters. A period piece featuring all these and more. You could have a really interesting movie about the Brotherhood of the Shield initially working for Newton, only to realize what he has been doing to Nostradamus and turning against him to stop his insane plans for power. You could even have the Ancient One from Doctor Strange show up and reveal that she gained the title of Sorcerer Supreme from defeating Newton. Number 8. Cold War Avengers, aka the Agents of Atlas. Now, while I want to call this the Cold War Avengers, in the MCU, the Avengers Initiative only started in the 1990s, so we'd have to call it the Agents of Atlas. But imagine a team set in the 1950s or 60s using members from both the 1950s Avengers What If and Avengers 1959. As I said earlier, I would suggest giving it the name the What If team took when they became official in the Marvel Universe, the Agents of Atlas. Also, so sequels could draw in members of that team as well. But wait, oh look, I made another period piece! I swear that's not intentional! But Marvel has made a period of era, but Marvel has left a large gap of time between Captain America and the modern day of the Avengers films that we need to fill. And I think the best idea for this film would be a team of heroes brought together by Dum Dum Dugan and Peggy Carter in the Captain America movie and Agent Carter TV series. This is because we would need to replace Jimmy Woo and Nick Fury because of their origins in the MCU. Although we could have a Nick Fury Sr. that more resembles the classic Nick Fury that looked a bit like Hasselhoff. Anyways, the members of the two teams in the comics were, for the What If, we had Marvel Boy, Venus, Jan of the Jungle, the Human Robot, Gorilla Man, 3D Man, Namora, and Jimmy Woo. And for the 1959 team, there was Sabretooth, Kraven the Hunter, Ulysses Bloodstone, Silver Sable, Blonde Phantom, Dum Dum Dugan, Eric Koenig, Dominic Fortune, Magician Paolo McTeague, as well as Namora and Gorilla Man. And they were led by Nick Fury. With that, I think you can probably narrow down who the team members would be. Honestly, I think Namor and Gorilla Man being the only two that were on both teams should be there. And being since you don't want to have too many members on a team starting out, I think the best way to go would be to narrow down from there. Peggy Carter and Dum Dum Dugan would be kind of like Nick Fury, so we don't really count them. I would say 8 members would be the best to utilize, so let's cut us down to there because we have 6 slots left to fill. Kraven and Jen are both wild person hunters. However, since Kraven is about to get his own solo film, I think Jan would be the best choice there. Because this also cuts out X-Men's character Sabretooth, because Sabretooth should be saved for the X-Men films, and Jan works better here. I would give the final slots to Marvel Boy, Ulysses Bloodstone, Venus, and Blonde Phantom. Now, why those ones? Well, Marvel Boy gives you a science fiction character to this team. Granted, I would change his origins from being the child of Jewish German scientists who fled to Uranus to escape Nazis to being the child of Jewish German scientists who were abducted by aliens while trying to flee Nazis. It works better in the MCU. Ulysses Bloodstone gives you a fantasy character, as he is an ancient caveman that managed to survive to the present day due to an alien gemstone embedded in his chest. Also, he's a monster hunter, which would tie into my suggestion for a villain. Venus would add more mythology to the MCU, being since she's a siren who that worked for the goddess Aphrodite, although initially she was supposed to be the goddess Aphrodite. And lastly, Blonde Phantom, simply because of her connections to She-Hulk, and that's having an upcoming show. If I could fit one more on the team, it would be 3D Man, because he is a lot like Cap. As for the villain, I would have it be Baron Blood, who has abducted a child from the Kingdom of Wakanda to start a world war in the 1960s. And I would suggest that being Njobu, because I think it would be rather interesting to have it be that this helped tie into his beliefs that led to what Killmonger did later on. And next up is number 7, which is US-1, which I'm sorry, this is yet another period piece. I'm sorry, I did not intend to do this. Well, I started in the 50s, went to the 60s, we're now in the 70s. But if you are a fan of comic reviewer Linkara, you already know who Ulysses Solomon Archer, aka US-1, is. Archer is a trucker, a superhero trucker. I imagine this film being a callback to the old trucker films of the 70s, and have it set in those 70s as well. Have the first movie be an origin film with Baron von Blimp and the mind-controlling Midnight as the villains, as Archer has to race to make a delivery against von Blimp in order to keep Papa Wheelie from losing his diner, while dealing with the mysterious Midnight, who will at the end be revealed to be his girlfriend, suffering from an alternate persona brought about by the influence of her mysterious mind whip. Have the second one further explore the weird tech, bring in the brother as the villainous Highwayman, and have Midnight come to terms with her split personality and become an anti-hero who helps Archer as both Mary and Midnight, while also revealing that the tech Von Blimp, Midnight, and Highwayman have all been using come from somewhere else. Lastly, have the third go hog wild by bringing in to the modern day and reveal that at the end of the second film, Mary and Archer have become space truckers going around and helping people with their souped-up space truck. Have Howard the Duck show them face off against something silly, while also setting up some big Marvel stuff for later on. Not everything has to be big and epic, and I feel that there is space in Marvel's lineup for a trilogy of silly trucker films. Number 6, Brute Force. First off, I want to say start this off with a cartoon. A literal, 15-minute cartoon at the beginning of the film. Have the implied backstory of this film be a cartoon. Have it be something goofy and silly, and then we break people. Brute Force is one of the silliest things Marvel has ever made, but it could also be one of the darkest things Marvel could make. In the comics, Brute Force's miniseries had them being made by an environmentalist who wanted to protect nature by creating cyborg animals. In 2019, however, it was retconned that they are a weapon plus creation. And I say do both for the movie. Started off with that 15-minute cartoon, old 80s style cartoon in the vein of Captain Planet, Transformers, G.I. Joe, then transitioned to the real world. Have the main character be a reporter, and I'm going to say have it be Robbie Robertson. Have him investigating rumors that 40 years ago, the weapon program that in the 40s created Captain America created something else in the 80s. Have him eventually come across brute force sealed away in tanks, kept preserved for time. Have him find them just as the brute force pods are being taken away by AIM, who are planning on running experiments to create more of these cyborg animals, as well as other things. Have Robbie accidentally free them in order to save himself, and thus Dr. Echo, Lionheart, Sword, Boomer, Weapon 2, and Bear are unleashed. Have him learn about all the horrible experiments the government did to these animals and others as a way to try and create cybernetic super soldiers. Meanwhile, have AIM's scientists utilize the research from the Weapon Plus files, as well as some other research to create a villain to stop brute force. MODOK. Also have the government trying to stop brute force because it will reveal that the government had something to do with this Weapon Plus program that tested on animals, leading to an all-out battle between AIM, the government, and brute force, with AIM defeated, MODOK escaping, the government arresting and releasing brute force, as Robbie releases a report on how the government turned these animals into cyborg animals with human-level intelligence, and the government is required to grant them citizenship, and end with Robbie forming a new paper to make sure that the truth about everything gets out. Frontline. Yes, with this movie you could set up Frontline, MODOK, and have brute force be part of the films. Number 5, The Human Torch. What can I say? I like exploring the period between Captain America the First Avenger and Captain Marvel. There's an untapped goldmine there set in the period between 1940 and 1990. That's 50 years we could do stuff with. So let's do that. This film would start in the 1940s with the disappearance of Captain America. Howard Stark would see this as a chance to turn to activate a project created by one of his employees that was seen in the first Captain America movie, The Human Torch. And this would be a kind of a one-off film, because, well, first let me describe what I would want to do with this film. It would start off with the Human Torch helping the soldiers in war as a replacement to Cap. However, after the war ends, Howard decides to test the Human Torch to see if he's capable of fitting in civilian life, despite the government's opposition to that due to him being a robot. The entire film from this point would be about the Human Torch trying to figure himself out, acting as a superhero while also dealing with what makes a person, really lean into the existentialism of whether or not he counts as one. The climax would have the Human Torch realizing he does count as a person, only to sacrifice himself, completely obliterating his AI to save people and his body to be placed into storage. Have 2 end credit scenes. One would be Tony Stark finding the data tracks that his father used to create the Human Torch's AI to create Jarvis, who would go on to become Vision. And have another one showing the body being found in the modern day and being worked on by the scientist known as Dr. Stack with the code of Z2P45-9-X-51 being seen as he works on the destroyed body. Yes, you can use this to set up the origins of Jarvis/Vision and Aaron Stack, the Machine Man. Number 4, The Flight Program. Yes, I want an Alpha Flight movie, because they could be used for something very particular. Well, actually, 2 things very particular. Just hear me out. Have it start off in Canada with the flight program being shut down, just like what happened in the first issue of the Alpha Flight comics. However, change the reason for why they're being shut down. The flight program is being shut down after a disastrous first mission of the team led to the death of their leader. Heather Hudson, who was the scientist in charge of the program, desperate to keep the flight program going to honor their leader, who was also her husband, beseeches the Canadian government to let them continue. Unknown to her, former flight member Michael Two Youngman is looking into something and seemingly dies, managing to get a message to Heather just as she is in a meeting with some higher-ups. Seeing this, she uses it to get them to agree to let her bring the team together. Unfortunately, as most of the original Alpha Flight is unavailable, she brings together a new team. This new team would be the diminutive, yet super strong and agile Puck, Michael Two Youngman's 2 daughters, his adopted daughter, Snowbird, and his biological daughter, Talisman, Roger Box, who is the creator of the powerful box armor that he can merge with, the amphibious woman, Marina, and the force field generating Radius. And Heather would use a much more streamlined armor that Box created called the Vindicator armor to fight alongside them. They would investigate Michael's death, only to find a heavily guarded Weapon Plus facility. Yes, I want to bring more Weapon Plus stuff in because the Weapon Plus stuff is really interesting. Specifically in this case, a Weapon X facility. It is being controlled by a splinter group as they break in. Inside, they would find a young man by the name of Kyle being experimented on, and Heather would freak out after finding him because the experiments they're running on Kyle are similar to the experiments that were run on her husband. This causes her to have a panic attack while in the Vindicator suit, and when it goes low on power, she breaks out of it, transforming into Sasquatch, destroying the facility and sending the Weapon X people running. In the aftermath, the flight program would be reinstated, and the team of the film, with the addition of Kyle Gibney, aka Wildchild, would be designated Alpha Flight. Bobs would reveal some information to Heather that he found in the Weapon X facility, that her husband, James Howlett, had a daughter with the same powers as him, and it seems Weapon X has a hold of her. And in a post-credit scene, Heather would have a nightmare about Michael warning her to be afraid because Tanarak is coming. Yes, if you were paying attention, I set up this Heather as being a fusion of both the X-Files Heather and the 616 Heather, and I set up Wolverine, Logan, James Howlett as being already dead, so that way we could have Laura be the new Wolverine in the MCU. I also set up Tanarak and the Great Beasts of Canada, as well as more Weapon X and Weapon Plus stuff. And now we are in my top 3, with number 3 being the Howling Commandos. No, I am not talking about the Howling Commandos that were already in the films. I'm talking about the other Howling Commandos. I'm talking about Nina Price, the half-vampire, half-werewolf character known as Vampire by Night, and Kantu, the living mummy, the mysterious Manthibian, Frankenstein's monster, Ted Sallis, the Man-Thing, and added for the film, Elsa Bloodstone, daughter of the monster hunter Ulysses Bloodstone. And they could take on the more supernatural threats to the MCU. Their film could literally be about ancient demons trying to take over the world, attacking a city. The Avengers are busy elsewhere, so a former S.H.I.E.L.D. operative, let's say Buzz McMahon, activates the Stake Protocol, an old, long-forgotten S.H.I.E.L.D. protocol. He travels the world gathering these monstrous heroes to face these foes. The set pieces as he and Elsa gather the Howling Commandos would be spectacular, and when it reaches the climax, imagine Frankenstein using a giant hammer and a machine gun to plow through armies of demons, the Manthibian dragging them into rivers to fight them, Nina using werewolf and vampire powers to take on some of the stronger demons, and Kantu using his mystic senses to track the source of them, Man-Thing teleporting to where they need to go, and Elsa using her skills as a monster hunter to take down the source of the threat. And end the film with Buzz pulling the ultimate checkmate of the film, managing to take control of a dragon, which he uses to fly them all out after they defeat the bad guys. The end credits could tease villains like Dracula, Diablo, or other magical supernatural villains from Marvel. It would be amazing. And be like if we actually got a dark universe, like Universal tried to do, but with Marvel. Number 2 would be Gargoyles. Yes, I know it's a Disney property and not a Marvel one, but let me ask you this. Wouldn't it be awesome to bring it into Marvel? Imagine David Xanatos is revealed to be the one to have bought the Stark Tower. As the movie begins, you would see him moving a castle to atop the tower, adding more onto it to ensure the old Scottish castle supported. The movie would essentially contain elements from the entire first season of Gargoyles, including the Gargoyles' origin, Damona's betrayal, the creation of Coldstone and the Steel Clan, the theft Xanatos tricks the Gargoyles into, a battle between Xanatos, Damona, and Coldstone against the Gargoyles, Coldstone switching sides to Goliaths and seemingly dying, Damona escaping to return later, Xanatos going to jail, and the Gargoyles moving into the clock tower. Now imagine all of that with elements of the MCU thrown in. Have Goliath and Elisa Maza go and see the Sorcerer Supreme in regards to Coldstone and have him give them something to help him see the truth. Have the Steel Clan made from remnants of Stark Tech. Have Lexington geek out over the technology. Have Broadway have a desire to join the Avengers and be a hero. You could even have him have gone to go see the Captain America musical. You could have the post-credit scene be Puck's deal with Damona and make references to Loki, as well as having Macbeth ready to don his hunter's guard to take her on, showing that he knows other types of hunters in the Marvel Universe due to his immortality, like Moon Knight, Bloodstone, or Blade. Gargoyles is 100% able to be brought into not just the MCU, but Marvel as a whole, and I would love to see this happen. And lastly, number 1. This is short and sweet. I have no name for this, but I'm going to call it On the Couch with Luis, Korg, and Drax. This is the movie I want the most, and it is the simplest and cheapest film Marvel could ever make. It is literally just Luis, Korg, and Drax sitting down and discussing all of the Marvel movies that have occurred so far. Literally a giant recap film being described by Luis, Korg, and Drax. Disney, please make this happen. The end credit scene writes itself. Have Deadpool show up and describe how Deadpool fits in the MCU. It's genius, simple, and cheap. Yeah, I know that last one is short, but it's easy to describe. And with that said, those are the 10 movies I would love to see Marvel make the most, but they won't. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you want to follow my Twitter, you can, but you have to be over 18 in order to follow. If you want to help support this channel, I have a Patreon. And if you want to help support me due to the fact that I am homeless, I have a GoFundMe in order to help create a community home for homeless people in upstate New York. With all that said, thank you and join me next time.